Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing a story that you might have actually lived through yourself, and trust me, it's a love story. Are you ready? Let's go! She was 64 years old, standing alone in her antique shop on a rainy New Orleans afternoon, when a 27-year-old stranger walked through that door and stopped her heart completely. And what this young man whispered to her that night, a secret he had never told any woman before, made her realize her real life was only just beginning. Oh girls, grab your wine and sit down, because I have to tell you about Margaret. I heard this story from a woman I met at a market in New Orleans last spring, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. You know how some stories just stay with you? This is one of those. Margaret Collins was 64 years old. She owned a small antique shop on Magazine Street in New Orleans, right in the heart of the Garden District. The shop was called Forgotten Things, and honestly, that name said everything about how Margaret felt about her own life at that point. She had been running that shop for almost 22 years, ever since her husband Thomas passed away. No children, no family nearby, just the shop, the old furniture, the dusty paintings, and the quiet sound of rain on the windows. Now girls, I want you to picture this woman for a second. Margaret was not someone who had given up on herself. She kept her silver hair cut clean and neat. She wore linen blouses and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She was the kind of woman who knew the history of every single object in that shop. She could hold a 1920s brooch in her hand and tell you exactly who might have worn it and what kind of life that woman probably lived. She had this gift for seeing the story behind forgotten things. But when it came to her own story, she truly believed the last chapter had already been written. That rainy Tuesday afternoon in October, Margaret was sitting behind the counter reading when the door opened. She looked up, expecting maybe a tourist or a regular customer, but the man who walked in was neither. He was young, really young, tall, dark hair soaking wet from the rain, wearing a simple grey jacket, holding a small notebook pressed against his chest like it was something precious. He looked around the shop with these wide, genuinely amazed eyes, the way a child looks at something magical for the very first time. And Margaret told the woman who told me this story that in that moment, something shifted in her chest, something she had not felt in a very long time. His name was Daniel Hartley, 27 years old. He was a writer working on his first novel, and he had come to New Orleans specifically to research the city's history. He had walked past Forgotten Things a dozen times, but had never gone in. That day, the rain forced him through the door. He told Margaret later that it was the best thing the rain had ever done to him. They started talking the way strangers sometimes do in small, quiet shops when there is nowhere to be, and the rain keeps falling. He asked about a set of old letters he found in a wooden box near the window. Margaret told him the whole story behind them, about the woman who had written them, the soldier who had never come home. Daniel listened with his notebook open, writing things down, looking up at her with such genuine attention that Margaret felt something she had almost forgotten the name of. She felt seen. Girls, do you understand what I mean when I say that? Not looked at, seen. There is a difference. Thomas had seen her like that once, but Thomas had been gone for 22 years. And in all those years, no one had sat across from Margaret Collins and looked at her the way this young man did, like what she was saying actually mattered, like she was the most interesting person in the room. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Always in the late afternoon, always with his notebook, always with a new question about some object in the shop. Margaret started setting things aside for him. A map from 1887, a photograph of a jazz musician from the 1940s, a pocket watch that had belonged to a riverboat captain. She told him the stories and he wrote them down, and every single afternoon that shop felt less like a place where forgotten things went to wait and more like a place where something was beginning. One evening, about 2 weeks after that first rainy Tuesday, Daniel arrived at closing time. Margaret was turning off the lights in the back when she heard him knock on the glass. She let him in, and he stood there looking nervous in a way she had not seen from him before. He was holding a small wrapped package. He said it was a thank you gift for everything she had shared with him. Inside was a first edition book of New Orleans poetry from 1931. Margaret held it in her hands and felt tears come to her eyes before she could stop them. "Daniel," she said, "this is too much. I cannot accept this." And he looked at her very seriously and said, Margaret, can I tell you something I have never told anyone?" She said yes, and then this 27-year-old man sat down in the old velvet chair by the window and told her the truth about his life. He told her that he had spent his entire adult life feeling completely alone in rooms full of people, that he had tried relationships but always felt like he was performing a version of himself that no one actually wanted to know the real one beneath, that the only times he had ever felt genuinely at ease in his entire life were in this shop in these 2 weeks talking to her. Margaret sat very still and listened, and when he finished, she said something that surprised even herself. She said, "Daniel, I think you just described the last 22 years of my life. They sat in that shop until almost midnight. No music. It's just the rain coming back and the old clock on the wall ticking and two people being completely honest with each other in the way that is almost impossibly rare." Margaret told him about Thomas, about the loneliness that had become so familiar she had stopped recognizing it as loneliness and just started calling it life. Daniel told her about growing up feeling different, feeling too serious, too quiet, too much for everyone around him. And somewhere in that conversation, without either of them planning it or even fully understanding it, something became real between them. Not rushed, not dramatic, just real. Now I know what some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking, okay, but what happened next? Did they stay together? Did the age difference become a problem? Did people talk? And here is what I can tell you. Margaret and Daniel spent the next 6 months inseparable. He finished his novel in New Orleans and dedicated it to her. The dedication read, "For the woman who taught me that the most valuable things in any room are the ones with the longest stories." People talked, of course they did, because people always talk. Tourists came into the shop and saw them together and raised their eyebrows. Some of Margaret's older friends pulled her aside and told her to be careful, that he would leave, that she was making a fool of herself. But here is what Margaret told the woman who told me this story. She said, "I spent 22 years being sensible and careful and appropriate, and I was lonely every single day." Daniel walked into my shop on a rainy afternoon and in 2 weeks made me feel more alive than I had felt in 2 decades. I would rather have 1 real year than 20 careful ones. Girls, I think about that line all the time. 1 real year over 20 careful ones. How many of us are living those careful years right now? How many of us stopped believing that something unexpected and beautiful could still walk through our door? Margaret was 64 years old. She thought her story was over. She was wrong, and that is the story of Margaret and that rainy afternoon in New Orleans that changed everything. If this story touched something in you, if you felt even a little bit of what Margaret felt sitting in that shop, listening to Daniel tell his truth, then I want you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button because it tells me that these stories matter to you and it helps more people find them. Subscribe to this channel because every single week I bring you a new story just like this one. Stories about real people, real feelings, real unexpected turns that life takes when you least expect it. And leave me a comment below. Tell me, do you believe it is ever too late for something real to begin? I read every single comment and I want to hear what you think. Because you showing up here and listening, that means everything. I will see you in the next story. Do not go anywhere because the next one is even better.